All right. We talked about energy a little bit. What would be, if you were to capsulize your position, what would a Pawlenty administration look like?
On energy?
On energy.
In 2 words, more energy. So all of the above, and I would do also one other thing, Jen. We have to Americanize our energy sources. I am really tired, and I know everybody in the country is too, of having our security and economic future attached to places and people and leaders who don't share our values, don't like the United States. We have our economy going up and down with the whims of whether some, nut job in the Middle East, has for breakfast on a given day. So it's in our best interest to develop our own energy here, and we've got plenty of it. If we get aggressive and committed to it, we can Americanize our energy sources, and it's all of the above. But the truth is, if you look at that pie chart on baseload energy, half of it's coal currently, 20% nuke, 20% natural gas, 10% renewables. The demand of that pie chart is going to grow substantially. And if President Obama succeeds in basically stopping further development of coal and only symbolically advancing nuclear, all we're going to have left is natural gas and renewables. And again, natural gas is a tremendous opportunity. We should lean into it really hard, but that's not going to be enough. We're going to need all of the above.
Will nuke energy survive the devastation of Japan?
Yes, it will.
How will we convince Americans that this is safe?
Well, first of all, we should pause and remember our friends and the people in Japan who are suffering, and there's a tremendous loss, and it's going to take months and years to sort through that, and we should remember the heartache and keep those individuals in our thoughts and prayers. 2 is we should review the situation and learn what we can from it, but let's keep in mind those Japanese plants were much older plants. They were built decades ago. They weren't using the most recent technology and most recent best practices. So should we make sure we review that to double and triple ensure that American plants are as safe as they can be? Yes, but I don't think it should stifle the further development of nuclear energy.
The next step is this is a Rorschach test question, and we'll find out how you think about some stuff here. This is going to be a tough one.
All right.
We've been talking about the influence of potential influence of a personality, Donald Trump, who's getting a lot of press. In the last couple of days, he was on the O'Reilly program, and the other day he said, "Hey, if we are in a war, if we win a war, aren't we entitled to reparations? Aren't we entitled to the natural effects of winning a war? And since if we have to be over here, aren't we entitled to pay ourselves back out of Iraqi oil? And if we leave, the Iranians are just going to come in and steal it anyway. So why shouldn't we just stay and restore the American taxpayer with the proceeds from Iraq oil?" It sounds like a bizarre and weird notion, but historically he's accurate. Should Americans pay ourselves back first?
Well, first of all, I think Donald Trump commenting on these issues is interesting. I think obviously he's been successful. He's funny. He's engaging. He's entertaining. So he brings a voice to the table that I think will be interesting. And I look forward to having those discussions directly and indirectly with him. But 2, we have to define our national security interests in a way that isn't contingent upon pay to play. In other words, we have to put our security interests first without regard to whether we're going to have a cash and carry approach to it. That being said, in those circumstances where we're in places where they have the money or they expect us to do things and it's also in our interest where they can pay us back or help pay for it, sure, absolutely. And you saw it in Kuwait, for example, right. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and I think it's reasonable to expect if we do something that advances their interests as well as ours that they help pay the freight.
The hardest question I'm going to ask you this morning was our intervention in Iraq a just war?
In Iraq?
Yes.
Yeah, the best information that we had, President Bush had at the time, and other world leaders had at the time, that we had a unstable leader of that country who had weapons of mass destruction, had them in the past, had used them in the past, and was poised perhaps to use them again. Not to mention the other concerns that were had. But that was the main initial premise for going into Iraq. And President Bush had to make a very difficult decision. If he had gone in and did go in and it didn't go well, he was going to get blamed for some of that, obviously. But if he hadn't gone in and it turned out that Saddam Hussein had the weapons of mass destruction and he used them against us or one of our allies and triggered larger consequences, then President Bush would have been accused of being asleep at the switch. So in that moment, he made a courageous decision, and he erred on the side of being aggressive in protecting the interests of the United States of America and our allies, and I think he made the right call. even though it turned out later that the information perhaps wasn't fully accurate.
Would President Pawlenty take us into Libya in any capacity?
I called on March 7th, Jan, for establishment of the no-fly zone. I think I was the first national leader or candidate or person to call for it, or one of the very first. At the time, the rebels had Gaddafi on the ropes. They had great momentum. He was openly talking about, there were news reports of him voluntarily leaving. And I think the threat of or early establishment of that no-fly zone would have succeeded and nudged him out. Unfortunately, the President of the United States dithered for several weeks after that. Gaddafi got momentum back. He got his quote-unquote mojo back, and obviously pushed the rebels into a very different position. The other thing is the President of the United States and the leader of the free world has now subordinated America's goals and interests to those of the Arab League and the United Nations. That's really untenable, and it's horrendously bad judgment and horrendously bad decision-making. He has said Gaddafi must go. And when you have the President of the United States and the leader of the free world saying Gaddafi must go, he needs to go. But now he has a UN resolution that prohibits us from doing the things, the additional things, to actually make that happen in any sort of reasonable time frame or any sort of reasonable way.
So are we hosed?
No, we're not hosed. But he's made it tremendously more difficult. And his thinking here and his explanation is muddled. I think it is confused. I think it is naive. And it's the same kind of muddled, confused, naive thinking we saw in the early days and weeks of Egypt, and we're seeing as it relates to Syria.
We've got Iowans now on their way to Libya to, quote, help out. What do we tell the parents and family members of those Iowans who are in the Air Guard?
Well, what we tell them, I think, is this is a situation that the United States has now identified its goals, and the rule needs to be when America deploys its military and America goes to war or engages in a military action, America needs to win. So we don't have the option now, nor should we, of saying, oops, we're just kidding. We have identified the goals for the country via our president, and I think in a mistaken and confused way. But now he needs to finish the job. And finishing the job, I mean, there is no outcome where Gaddafi can stay now, Jan. He has to go.
So we're still trying to define the Obama Doctrine. What's the Pawlenty Doctrine?
Well, I think the Pawlenty Doctrine is this. We are experiencing history unfold in the Middle East before our eyes. It's not just about Libya. There are up to 10 or so countries experiencing various degrees of revolt in the tinderbox of the world. And what happens in the next 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 24 months in that region will have a lot to say what global security and our national security interests for us and our allies look like in that region and around the world. And we don't have the option as the world's only superpower, the leader of the world, to say, we're not that interested, we're going to sit this one out. How this unfolds is going to have a lot to say about the future security of our country and our allies. And I think each of these countries has a different history, a different culture, a different relationship with the United States, both economically and militarily. And I wouldn't make a sweeping doctrine that applies to all of these countries, but there are some basic values that I would follow. One is we want to be on the side of those places and people that share our values. Democracy, free and fair elections, free and fair flow of information, human rights. And you can't flip a switch from what's going on there now to that overnight, but we can be moving in that direction. And when you had Mubarak in Egypt, for example, an 82-year-old dictator who wasn't long for that country, either because of his age, this revolt, or this fall's election, or the normal life expectancy of an 82-year-old, he wasn't going to be the leader of Egypt much longer. What was the plan post-Mubarak? And the answer was not much. And when he stole those elections in 2010 in the parliament of Egypt, and was kind of the additional straw that ticked the people off. What did the United States say about that? What did our president say about that? What did the leader of the free world say about that in terms of holding Mubarak accountable, even nudging him towards freedom? Notwithstanding any military considerations, just even in our rhetoric and our position, the answer, not much. Not much. And so we enabled that situation, and that has to change. We have to be using the levers we have in appropriate ways to hold dictators, thugs, tyrants, suppressors of freedom accountable for at least moving in the right direction over time.